ecosystem and our learnings to support building a Web3 community in Japan. And also now we are growing subscribers or newsletters like 1.5 times or 2 times since beginning of 2023. So I think with having the East Tokyo or DAO Tokyo this April, I think our community will become bigger and bigger right now.
Cool. And so before we go into our lessons learned, just wanted to share a little bit of context. So Japan is known for many things. It's known for breathtaking views. It's known for compelling storytelling, as well as Shibuya meltdowns. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but I was very shocked the first time I ever saw it. Basically, it's just people super drunk and super wasted around Shibuya. So on a more serious note, some context. Recently, the Prime Minister talked about blockchain technology in a recent House of Representatives meeting. He said, if you consider DAOs, people are interested in the same social issues, can form new community, NFTs can also be used to diversify the income of creators and maintain highly loyal fans. So Japan is starting to be known as more embracing of Web3. So there is that recent spotlight on blockchain technology in the House of Representatives meeting. There's been updated NFT taxation guidelines to make it easier for NFT traders and creators to understand what are taxation and legal requirements, as well as central bank potentially piloting a program for a digital version of the yen. And finally, there's a Web3 policy office being established under the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, focusing specifically on creating policies to enable more adoption of blockchain technology. So here are some recent articles that were published around DAOs, how the Japan government is creating DAOs to have deeper Web3 exploration, as well as some updated taxation rules. So for example, recently they're easing what was an existing 30% crypto tax on paper profits for token issuers. A second reason why Japan is starting to be known for being a crypto hub is its growing ecosystem. So it's already home to several prominent blockchain companies like Bitflyer, which is one of the largest exchanges in the world. There's also a lot of emergence of blockchain startups and DAOs. And there's also very vibrant blockchain community with regular meetups, conferences, and hackathons. So Bankless Japan being creating regular meetups. There's several conferences like Yuki was saying. There's DAO Tokyo, ETH Tokyo, Japan Blockchain Week. That's all starting, I think, next or in April or May or June of this year. And then there's different hackathons happening to encourage more participation in Web3. One of our core team members, Kaz, is creating a DAOathon in Tokyo, and that is helping folks create DAOs all around the world, but gathered in Tokyo. There's also cryptocurrency adoption. Japan has been early adopters of technology, but several large retailers like Big Camera, which is, I guess, akin to Best Buy, already accept Bitcoin payments. And so there is examples of large retailers accepting payments. So that's just to set some context. And so I can get into some of the lessons learned. So one of the first lessons learned is we wanted to recognize cultural differences between projects in Asia versus projects maybe in the West. And so we set about talking to several folks that are in Japan, but also outside of Japan to get more context in terms of how we should think about structuring and organizing the community. One VC and builder we talked to, who's heavily focused in Asia as well as South America, mentioned that many projects really target niche communities and homogenous audiences in Asia, specifically in Korea. And one of the biggest challenges is that information flow is definitely a barrier because what's happening in crypto Twitter will reach an Asian audience a little bit later due to language, but also time differences. One community, Kudasai, which is a Japanese Web3 community, one of the comments that they made was that one of the things they first set out to do was actually just to build a large community. And because of that, they have a very diverse background of contributors and community members. And because of that, like they're seeing a lot of positive impacts from these contributors because it enables them to provide a lot of different types of services or activities, things like AMAs, advisory services, creating NFTs, because they can tap into the expertise of their community, which is both very large. I think they have about 20,000 Telegram members, as well as tapping into the expertise of their community. We also talked to organizer of Buzi DAO, which is a Taiwanese DAO, and they repeated something that we heard previously, which was it's really focused on creating a community of people first. The tech and token design doesn't really matter as much in the early stages, and culturally there's just more trust by default to be more cooperative, and there's heavier emphasis on consensus versus individualistic efficiency. So those were just like some of the factors that we thought about when we were building our own community. And finally, we were talking to Duke, who's I think he's here today. He started Bankless Korea, and he's part of the Nonce community, which is a Web3 focused community in Korea. So he echoed that same comment, which was like Koreans build a lot of their own language communities due to language barriers because most Web3 projects are in English. And in order to sort of overcome this hurdle, they typically, again, this is generalizing, but a lot of Koreans will join Web3 projects in the ecosystem as a tribe rather than a sovereign individual. So yeah, we just set about talking to these folks just to get more insight into their own communities while we build ours. The second lesson we learned was we had to find something that makes us unique. The reason is because like we recognize that there are already existing communities in Japan that either provide crypto education or NFT projects, building products, etc. So when we were looking inward to decide like what would make us unique, we recognized that being a bridge between Japan and the rest of the world would be our differentiator. Because like we come from a background being an international media node of Bankless, like we're able to provide education for beginners from a trusted source, but at the same time, be able to create original content. So on the left is just like a screenshot of the articles that we've published so far of translations from Bankless. But then on the right side is an article that I recently wrote about Akia DAO, which I'll touch on later. So we have both translated and original content. The third lesson was reuse what works or copy paste. So in doing so. We leverage the same structure from the international media node of Bankless. So we get ongoing Bankless support in terms of like how to structure things, in terms of content. And for our own team, we're just like leveraging existing coordination tools that we already use. Myself, like I use Wonder because I work on Wonder, but we also use Notion because like we're also heavy Notion users. But the idea is that like we're not going to reinvent the wheel. By having existing content to just translate, it does save us a lot of time, and we can focus our energy on finding like what resonates with our community instead. The fourth lesson learned was partnerships are awesome, and so it kind of like there's definitely overlap with some of the other lessons. So partnerships are awesome because there's a number of communities in Japan already. We can leverage audience partnerships with existing communities, groups, and thought leaders. So on the right side, this is Yuki being interviewed by Joe Takayama. Who's a YouTuber with about 100,000 YouTube subscribers who talks about on a regular basis DAOs and Web3. So Yuki here was being interviewed about Bankless Japan and Bankless. And in doing so, like it really helps grow our audience, but it also exposes our audience to Joe's. And then we're also working with, in real life, meetup partners like CryptoBase, which is a venue that is really focused on crypto education in Japan. Interestingly, one of the requirements they have of whenever organizing events there is that they have to be, the speaker has to be someone who they've never heard from before, so that their members can learn something new. And then finally, like we've been working a lot on media partnerships, specifically for DAO Tokyo and ETH Tokyo, where we'll be creating content like interviews, articles, and things like that. But we're leveraging Bankless's distribution so that we can spotlight some Japanese projects that are either started by Japanese founders or the Japanese community, or international projects building in Japan and spotlighting it through Bankless. And then on the flip side, like we're also going to create interesting original content like interviews and things like that for our audience. And then the final lesson was just recognizing that there's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities in Web3 for Japan. Some of the challenges that we heard was infrastructure. There is a lack of infrastructure builders, which creates potentially a risk to Asian crypto ecosystem. We would love to see more infrastructure, like not to say that there isn't any right now, but I think by creating more, I think that just like creates more like building blocks so that future companies can build on. Language is something that we keep on hearing, so that's why for us, like we're trying to translate articles, but also create original content to address that language barrier. And then regulation and legal taxation challenges. There's currently no super compelling, strong geographic advantages of being based in Japan. There are some, and I think it is evolving, but currently it's not super strong. There's also shifting of expertise, because historically, I think a lot of known expertise is around like hardware, but Web3 shows that a lot of the projects that we work on can be borderless. I think some of the opportunities that we've heard were there's a lot of hungry retail investors and talent, which are two pillars of building a larger ecosystem. For me, this resonates a lot, which is I think Web3 provides an opportunity to work on meaningful work. Because there's lowered barriers to work on things that you're passionate about, it enables a lot of Japanese community members to identify any specific like DAOs or Web3 projects that really resonate with their beliefs, and they can work on it without going through like a very rigorous application process. And if the project no longer resonates with them, there isn't this whole concept of like you're working with that DAO for life. Similar to a traditional company. And then also there's evolving immigration policies. Just last week, 2 visas were updated, the J-Find and J-Skip, which is meant to attract new graduates or skilled workers, which is reducing the barrier to build there. And then lastly, it is a very technologically savvy population that is quick to adopt new technologies, which should actually help with this transition to Web3. So what's next? I just wanted to highlight 2 projects because I think they're very interesting. So one is Japanese builders expanding internationally. So Yuki is an example because Yuki's building Beyond Club, which is building a token-gated experience for creators or for DAOs. And we're actually working together through Wonder and Beyond Club, where we're providing infrastructure for project or organization contribution, while Yuki is working on the token-gated experience. I think that's like a great example of what we would be encouraging, which is not just build in Japan, but it's also how do we encourage a lot more Japanese builders to expand internationally, and how do you address new markets. And then the second is international community building in Japan. So I mentioned Akia DAO previously. Akia means vacant homes in Japanese. And currently, like it is a big social issue where a lot of rural towns they have a younger population who move away from these rural communities, and it leads to an accelerated deterioration of these communities. And so what Akia DAO does is they purchase an abandoned home. And they renovate it to turn it into a hacker house and providing also creative residencies, which is very interesting because then it encourages youth or younger generations to visit and stay in rural Japan and see the natural beauty, but also like it creates a sense of community in rural areas in addition to this high concentration of talent inside big cities. So those are just like two projects I wanted to highlight as examples of projects we'd love to work with at Bankless Japan to promote and talk about. And finally, if what we talked about like resonates with you, we'd love for you to follow us on Twitter, Bankless JP. And then also we have a subscription newsletter. You can subscribe to us. And then finally, if you know what we look like, we would love to talk to you because, like I said, Yuki and I are trying to create content from ETH Denver. And so we'd love to interview projects. And then, of course, like if you don't speak Japanese, that's cool because Yuki does, and he'll do the translations, and we'll post it in Bankless Japan. Or if you do speak Japanese, that's even better. Please find us because then it'll be less work for us. But yeah, come find us. Also, we are, like I said, we are organizing in-person meetups in Tokyo for Bankless Japan. So if if you're going to be in Tokyo, we'd love to talk to you and see if we can get you on as a speaker to promote more information sharing to our community. With that, I think that's it. Thank you for the time. We really appreciate it. Thanks.